trust in Ontario's electricity sector. One of the first actions that we took as a government was to put in place the Hydro One Accountability Act that required the board of directors at Hydro One to submit to the government for approval a new executive compensation framework that outlined the salaries of board members, the CEO, and the executive vice presidents. On February 8th, we received Hydro One's proposed framework for salaries, and it's clear that Hydro One has not taken sufficient action to reduce their own compensation in a meaningful way. I am disappointed that after 7 long months of work with Hydro One's board that they continue to fail to present a compensation framework that is reasonable and responsible to and for the people of Ontario. Hydro One has submitted a maximum CEO salary of $2.7 million for the CEO, and that's unacceptable for our government and the people of Ontario, who are Ontario Hydro One's largest stakeholder. Their proposed framework recommended executive vice presidents be paid anywhere between $875,000 to $1.8 million. The board has also failed to take steps to adequately reduce their own compensation as board members. I, and we as a cabinet, do not accept this framework. Our government takes our responsibility to the people of Ontario very seriously. We will not stand by any further and see out of control and out of touch salaries at Hydro One. I'm asking today that Hydro One come back with a revised framework, one that shows reason and respect for Ontario's electricity customers, the ratepayers, the people of Ontario who pay their energy bills on a monthly basis. I'm going to make it very clear that the people of Ontario will only accept a compensation framework that fits within our limits. The CEO's total compensation not to exceed $1.5 million. Executive compensation is not to exceed 75% of the CEO salary. And finally, board members' compensations is not to exceed $80,000. I trust that Hydro One will take this opportunity to align with the people of Ontario and put forward a framework that is fair and that's accountable to the people of Ontario. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
You can go as high as 1.5 million. The CEO of Hydro-Quebec famously makes under 500,000. Yeah. Hydro-Quebec is vastly bigger than Hydro One, 19,000 versus 5,000 employees. Yeah. They do everything from generation to delivering it to the billing.
Right.
So why does a guy that runs a company a quarter the size need 3 times the salary?
Well, we've asked the same questions. There are a few distinctions given that the company is obviously publicly traded, but with a significant sharehold profile that we have as the people of Ontario. We've looked at comparators. I believe there's some available here for you today. Hydro-Quebec was definitely one of them. We looked at other Crown corporations or companies in their likeness. We expressed and shared those to the Hydro One board as they went through their process. We believe that 1.5 million was the top end of a compensation framework. We're not opposed to a framework that puts a salary like you're suggesting there and has the kinds of incentives that would get to a number like 1.5, providing it aligns with what Ontario ratepayers expect, and that is to see a cut in their hydro rates, to create a competitive and affordable environment, whether you're a small business or a large manufacturer or industrial place, and for families and their homes. So 1.5 was as good as it gets for us, as fair as we thought it could be. But our salary, our base salary, was right in and around what you were suggesting from Hydro-Quebec.
Their response to you yesterday,
yeah,
at the deadline that you'd set for them,
yeah,
they essentially flipped you the bird. You've got 4 out of the 10 board members. Does the province not have sway over the 4 board members you appointed?
Well, we're confident that our wishes, our expectations, more importantly, were respected in those discussions. But clearly, in light of the letter We see that there doesn't seem to be a desire to respect the parameters that we put on the compensation for the CEO, and furthermore, compensation for the board members at the very least. There's now some discrepancies, obviously, with respect to other members of the C-suite and salaries that we wouldn't find acceptable, but those 2 points, the CEO compensation and the board members' compensation, we were clear and solid. There was a bright line, and yesterday's letter expressed that they weren't prepared to respect that.
So what can the government do now? What are your options? I mean, you put this on the table. They've come back and said, this is what we're proposing.
Yeah.
What is the government going to do?
Well, first of all, Laura, they've put that on their website. They've said that this has not been approved. I think the term they use is it's not yet been approved. It will not be approved as it's written. We gave clear parameters on the CEO compensation and board remuneration. Those were 2 very bright lines, sticking points for us. And we're hopeful that in very short order, they will come back with a framework that respects those numbers.
But what if they don't?
Well, look, I'm not going to speculate at this very moment, but we're not going to take very long to take action if we're come to an understanding that this is not the position that they're going to take. This is not a negotiation process for us. Those are numbers that we intend to hold, and I think they understand that certainly as of yesterday.
Are you talking about legislative action?
Well, for now, we're using the tools that we have in the toolbox, right? And that is to have a say by approving CEO compensation and board remuneration compensation. We believe that the Hydro One Accountability Act went as far as it could to respect the framework agreements. So I'm not going to comment or speculate on the potential for legislation. The legislation is already there. We have parameters, and we have the power to approve or disapprove compensation framework for those 2 pieces at least, and we want them to be respected.
Doesn't this just illustrate the American regulators' concerns about government interference?
No, the framework clearly lays out that the Government of Ontario, on behalf of the people of Ontario, have a right to approve or disapprove CEO compensation and board remuneration, amongst other things. It's there in the framework agreement. So we don't believe that that infringes on that at all. In fact, these are pieces that folks expected us to address very clearly at the time we were elected. It was a major piece of our campaign. Nobody was unclear about that, and we got tremendous support from the electorate on this signature piece. So we intend to move forward and see that those numbers are respected.
I haven't talked to Hydro One yet today, but I can imagine, like as is often the case in this kind of situation, they say they need to go out into the market and get the most talented executives. So, given that, not to be flip about money, because money is money, but $1 million here or there is not going to make much difference at all on anyone's hydro bill. So, I'm just wondering why you're taking this tack when yesterday Premier Ford, for example, up at the Ottawa announcement said, government interferes too much. So I'm just wondering if you could reconcile all that.
Well, again, let's work back from there. We're not interfering. This is something that we have a right vis-a-vis the framework agreement to chime in on, to approve or disapprove. We don't think that going from a $6 million man to something akin or close to a $3 million man is what the people of Ontario expect from us as representatives of the largest shareholder in that company. $1 million still means a lot to me, and I think it means a lot to the people of Ontario. It's more than just symbolic. I think that the problems that we had with Hydro One was a culture of excessive salaries that were disproportionate to what the rest of the market was paying people for companies like Hydro One. And as was mentioned earlier through a question, these base salaries in companies that are much larger but are crown corporations or something very similar have base salaries in and around $500,000. So the fact that we're sitting at $1.5 million gives, in our view, them a lot of flexibility to offer the kinds of incentives that will focus on operational efficiencies, bringing great customer services to the people of Ontario, and focusing on cutting the hydro rate, which is a key objective of us.
1.5, just a supplementary, is I'm wondering how that was chosen. That was what the CEO of OPG made. So was that your bar there?
That was our bar. We took, obviously, we took some comparators, and I believe there's some information for your consideration here, but we looked at salaries like the one at Hydro One and companies, Hydro-Québec, as base salaries and some of the incentives that that president and others like him would have, and fit those into percentiles. Those percentiles said to us we were being very fair and very reasonable.
Comment on the departure of the of Patrick Menely. He was in charge of business development and growth strategy for Hydro One. He resigned, and there could be more resignations in the company. Do you have any comment about the fact that that the company could be losing top executives in relation to this?
I can't comment on that specific one, and I'm not aware of any such considerations by those people. Right now, we're in a process of working with the Hydro One board to establish a framework that makes sense for the people of Ontario, and we're prepared, obviously, to stay true to the $1.5 million for the CEO compensation and the compensation that we laid out for the board members.
If they continue to resist, could you fire the board or the chair?
Well, the framework agreement provides for next steps, but we're not going to speculate on that. We're very hopeful, Laura. We're very hopeful that they'll come back and not just consider, but respect what we've put here. So we'll deal with that in the not too distant future if they have not.
I mean, they have come back and said this is what we're proposing. There has been a back and forth already. So
there has been, yeah.
Could you make decisions such as firing the board? Or
there are scenarios, but I don't want to upset in any way, shape, or form a process that by and large has been very respectful, and hope that we see clear for the numbers that we've put forward. Yes, sir.
See this as political interference. Do you view yourself on behalf of the government as an activist investor in this?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is what we were left with. And it's a difficult corporate profile to understand, but we're very close to being a majority shareholder, obviously in the 50% plus category. But as board ratios come, we're 4 and they have 6. It's not an activist role. It's not us against them. It's hopefully all of us for the people of Ontario. And so we continue to focus on our objectives of cleaning up the hydro mess, dealing specifically with the leadership. We believe that we've made significant strides in those regards. And these are kind of the 2 final points that we're looking at, and we're standing firm.
What you see as Hydro One's role then is, it was trying to take over a very coal-heavy, kind of interesting given the previous government's position, trying to take over a coal-heavy generator in the U.S., trying to do a lot of expansions. Is that Hydro One's role as the current government sees it, or is it to provide good service, good price? Because it's not doing either of those right now.
Well, we believe that customer service, transparent, accountable leadership, a piece of legislation that lays out the kind of relationship that we would have and the kinds of say we would have on certain things, like the compensation for the CEO and its board members to steer this ship right. We obviously went through a process in the wake of the retirement of Mayo Schmidt to put a board in place, and on these 2 matters we don't have agreement. So we're going to continue to work there.
Pour les résidents de Cat Lake qui, comme vous le savez, là, sont au près avec une crise du logement, de la moisissure. Je sais que au cours des dernières semaines, vous avez un peu renvoyé la balle au fédéral dans ce dossier-là, mais qu'est-ce que vous dites? Qu'est-ce que la province compte faire pour ces résidents qui sont quand même sur le territoire de l'Ontario pour les aider dans cette crise-là?
Oui. Je vais répondre en anglais. Look, I've had discussions with the Chief and Council of Cat Lake. This is a community that I've spent a great deal of time in a previous professional life. We're continuing those discussions, working with other stakeholders to see if we can provide some immediate, and it would be probably temporary relief on the housing, and I intend to get back to the Chief in the not too distant future on this. This is, for good reasons, in the confines of the federal government. They've done a lot of promising to these communities and delivered very little. And it's not that difficult. I was the MP for Kenora for 7 years. I built 7 schools, 1 per year. In that riding, we built nursing stations, we built police stations, we expanded subdivisions in communities as they needed them. We established a framework for schools that was objective so that when these crises came up, we'd be able to respond to them in a fair way with the resources to do it. The federal government has failed in these respects. I've made my intentions and my experience clear to them that we have an expectation that they will intervene in Cat Lake. We've seen nothing to this point, but we'll continue to press them hard for it.
Just to be clear, though, when you talk about providing relief on the housing, are you looking at providing funding, contractors, material? Like, what exactly should they expect? And in the next, you say in the short term, we're talking, I guess, in the next few weeks.
We have some options that we're looking at. They involve private companies, and so we're not at a point where we can make specific disclosures on those. But we're working with the community and looking at what resources they have in that community and or nearby. These would be temporary, obviously, solutions. But we're very interested in supporting Cat Lake and helping Cat Lake in its fight against the federal government, who's fundamentally failed them on the conditions that they currently face in many of their homes.
Minister, is Hydro One an unworkable hybrid of public and private interests? It would seem that you got rid of the board specifically over compensation. The very first issue that we know that they thwarted you on was compensation.
Right.
So maybe this beast doesn't work. Maybe it just needs to go back to either completely private or completely public.
Look, I'm an optimist here. 48% roughly of ownership of the company has proved to be difficult at times to assert or insert ourselves in places, but we have a great framework agreement, and if that framework agreement was taken seriously in the context of the CEO compensation and the board compensation, there wouldn't be much else to discuss. We have no intentions of being involved in the operational side of Hydro One. I can't comment on historical decisions that were made by both the business and approved by Cabinet. These were things that I think to business folks, people in the energy space, and the ordinary average person in Ontario would find difficult to comprehend, but we're working with what we got. And we don't think it's an unreasonable proposition to take a focused look at the CEO compensation, view it with comparators that we've discussed here today, a board framework that we think is fair and reasonable, and have that respected.
In a letter from Hydro One to you, they mentioned that they had talked to 13 job candidates over the past few months, and that they had identified a preferred candidate who they believe would take the job under their proposed framework.
Right.
Are you trying to ensure that their preferred candidate does not take the job?
Not at all. If that preferred candidate wants to and can work at that $1.5 million, which we think is fair and reasonable, we have not in any way, shape, or form been involved in their process. They've interviewed candidates and gone through a process. If they have someone then good for them. We would just need to see them accept the framework that we've proposed in terms of the CEO compensation.
Through their process, the shareholders, as part of the company, said that they didn't believe that a salary of $1.5 million, given that it's a publicly traded company, would be sufficient for the size of the publicly traded company.
Yeah.
Are you concerned at all that you might not be able to get the caliber of talent that you need to try and get the savings that Hydro One wants to achieve?
We believe we can. If we've got a CEO running a company like Hydro-Québec, considerably larger in its asset profile and its service mandate, then we believe the market bears that. We did our research, we did our own homework, and we think that's a fair compensation model for a CEO of Hydro One.
That's all the time we have, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Okay.
Thanks.